On Christmas Eve, my only son looked me dead in the eye and said,
"You're not invited. Only my wife's parents."
I fixed my scarf, steadied my breath, and walked out without a word, but I carried with me a resolve I had never felt before. I had paid for their roof, their table, their quiet, glittering life. And the next morning, with one phone call, I shut off the money that kept their perfect world humming. Before I continue, I request you to like and subscribe to help us keep these stories alive. Share in the comments where you're watching from and the moment that struck you, so others can find strength in your words. I am Levern Middleton, 68, a widow who believed that steady hands and clean books could build a shelter strong enough to outlast every storm. For decades I ran food, not fancy, honest pies, careful ledgers, and a promise to anyone who paid cash that they would taste what memory tastes like when it is warm. After my husband passed, I sold the business. People assumed I wanted comfort. They were wrong. I wanted permanence for my son, Mitchell. I wanted something that would not disappear when a market dipped or a boss changed or a friend turned fickle. So I put money where walls stand, the Bellevue house. We paid most of that down payment, my husband and I later. When the house glowed and the parties grew, I carried more quietly. The pool, the repairs, the heavy furniture Erica insisted was essential. The SUV transplants that bled green ink, the children's tuition that landed like a small anvil every semester. They never asked how much. They didn't want to know the weight of gratitude. Mitchell is clever, 38, good with screens, poor with seasons, forever surprised by bills that always arrive. Erica is polished, 35, practiced smile, appetites that require public applause to feel full. Bellevue loves the look of wealth. Clean hedges, clean teeth, clean reputations. I told myself pride would be enough to stand in a room where I had paid for half the light bulbs and still be introduced as Mitchell's mother. She used to run a little food place. It was not enough. Insults begin as pinpricks. You ignore them because the alternative is to bleed daily. Mitchell keeps our pool perfect, Erica cooed to friends, her voice sugared to a fine glaze while the check in my desk bore my name. Kenneth Henderson, father of the bride in spirit if not law, smiled at me like a blade and said, "At least she married up. Gives her a better life than a frugal one." Laughter, the polite kind, the kind that pretends to be harmless while aiming for the softest part of you. Vicky, with pearls that seemed to tighten whenever she lied, called pumpkin pie peasant food, and called me a generous maid on Erica's post, all while her own fingers tapped donation links that looked like virtue and felt like vanity. When Mitchell came to my door that gray afternoon and said, "Mom, you're not invited to Christmas. We want a refined atmosphere," the words fell like glass and I felt each edge. I didn't answer. I listened to the house instead, the old clock, the quiet shelves, the faint odor of pipe tobacco that sometimes visits when the air turns cold, and I went to the drawer where the papers live. Grief makes you imprecise. Time makes you exact. There it was in my husband's square handwriting, his will. His portion of that house was mine and mine alone. The math was simple, 60%, not a favor, not a gift, ownership. Power is not a shout. It is the silence that follows a decision. I called the bank and suspended the automatic life support I had been providing for years. The engine quieted. A strange peace entered the room. Then I did what I have always done. I prepared. Receipts, transfers, tuition checks, repair bills, pool treatments, furniture invoices, stacked and labeled with the measured care of a woman who has counted pennies and prepared payrolls and balanced more than accounts. I took screenshots, Erica's, our masterpiece posts, the pool she thanked Mitchell for, the parties staged on a table I had bought. I clipped an audio recording that should never have been necessary, Kenneth's voice telling me I could come after the party to clean up. Vicky's laugh, brittle and victorious. I printed 15 bound copies, Christmas gifts, wrapped in red and tied with gold. On the night of their party, I wore the dress from Mitchell's wedding, a deep navy that made me feel visible without apology. I walked with a lawyer who has learned my face, my steadiness, and the difference between loud men and honest paper. Erica saw me at the door and tried to block me with a hand manicured to command waiters. I held up my key and the deed. "I am co-owner," I said, and the room quieted the way rooms do when truth enters. I dimmed the lights and began. Slides told the story better than my throat could bear. Payments glowed against a dark screen like embers, my name signed in ink again and again where their pride had erased me. Guests opened the red and gold packages. Lawyers in the room did what lawyers do. They read, heads turned, eyes hardened. Kenneth's bravado cracked. Vicky's pearls rose and fell with a new kind of breathing. Mitchell's shoulders sank under a weight he had claimed not to notice. The air changed. Sometimes you can hear a reputation collapse, like ice breaking on a river. Justice, however, is not the twist. Justice is the minimum due. The twist arrived later, uninvited, the way truth often is. It began with a number in a corner of a statement, small, not meant to be seen. An insurance premium, homeowners, and attached to it a rider. A rider for a key person on an LLC I did not recognize. The payment dates overlapped with charges I had covered. I asked my lawyer to pull the filings. We found a shell company created 6 weeks after I sold my business, registered at a Portland address tied to Kenneth's ventures. Mitchell's name sat on it like a child's signature forged by a parent. The rider's beneficiary was Vicky. The key person was me. I have baked my whole life. Ingredients tell you who the cook is. Paper trails tell you who is hungry. The rider was not the only ingredient. There was a refinance attempted 2 years after my husband's death, the kind that skims equity in quiet cups and pours it into empty mouths. The signature on the broker's scan was my husband's name, written in a careful hand by someone who knew how to imitate loops and pressure. The date was months after his funeral. You do not sleep when you find something like that. You sit with the lamp on and you go cold in waves. The next morning I called the title company, who sent me to the lender, who sent me to their fraud department, who asked for a notarized affidavit and copies of every document which I provided. My attorney contacted the state regulator. We asked for the notary's book. There was no such notarization on the day in question. The broker had been disciplined before, quietly, fines without headlines. The equity, the rider, the shell, separate beads on a string that now tugged together. And there was one more bead, the kind that makes a mother's mouth go dry. A draft petition for guardianship found in Erica's email, unsent, but fully prepared, arguing that I had become financially impulsive and emotionally unstable after my husband's death, that I had dissipated family assets and needed a conservator. The physician's letter attached was a template waiting for a signature. The plan was simple: provoke me, document the provocation, then take control of my accounts in court. Under proposed conservator, the line read, Erica Henderson, daughter-in-law, with Kenneth as advisor to family finances. They had not just wanted me out of a dinner, they had wanted me out of my own life. That was my twist, not theatrical, not cinematic, real. I did not tell them at the party, because one thing age gives you is the instinct to let a fish swallow the hook. I let them rage about my slideshow while the lender opened a case file, while the regulator copied statements, while the notary's empty logbook arrived in a brown envelope like a cold wind. I met with a detective who had seen forged grief signatures before. He asked for patience. I did not have but gave anyway. The world moved on its little wheels. Forms, phone calls, a request for my husband's death certificate, the sound of a stapler somewhere that felt like a gavel. Consequence is a slower thing than applause, but it carries farther. In Bellevue, invitations are currency. By New Year's Eve, Kenneths were worth less than the paper they weren't printed on. He resigned from a council he bragged about and was rotated off a board that once put his name in bold at the top of their gala program. Vicky found the phone lighter than usual. People don't answer when charity becomes theater. Erica went quiet on Instagram. Our masterpiece disappeared. So did the comments that called me a maid. Mitchell came to my bakery in January. I had opened it with what was left of my savings, a small place with a clean window and my name in paint. The ovens were new, but the rhythm in my wrists was old. He stood in line like everyone else. When it was his turn, he didn't order. He just said, "Mom," and I heard every age of him at once. The boy who used to sneak the last piece, the teenager who slammed doors, the man who chose easy rooms over honest ones. He apologized, not with a speech, but with 3 words I had not heard since he was small. I was wrong. Sometimes forgiveness is a door that opens slowly because the hinges have rusted. I didn't swing it wide, but I opened it a finger's width. I told him I wouldn't bankroll him again. I told him boundaries are not punishments, they are fences that keep out wolves. He nodded. He said he would work. He said he would earn. I told him to do it where I could not see it, so I wouldn't mistake promises for progress. He cried. That, more than the words, made me believe we had a chance to be mother and son again, without a ledger between us. The legal things kept moving. The lender's letter arrived first, dry as toast. We have identified irregularities in the 20 refinance attempt. We apologize for any distress. Attached was a copy of their notice to the broker's licensing board. The regulator thanked me for bringing the matter to light. The detective told me the guardianship draft would be useful if anyone tried anything further. He said, "They wanted control. You gave them a record." My lawyer smiled the way old men smile when a storm spends itself and leaves the fence standing. I baked. People came. A local reporter who had tasted my pie at the party, the night my life learned to speak through slides, wrote a small piece about the bakery and the woman who finally chose self-respect over silent generosity. Customers brought their mothers. Men told me they wished they had drawn their lines earlier. Women pressed my hand for a second longer than strangers do. One afternoon, a woman in her 70s said, "My daughter-in-law calls simple food poor people's food." "Your pie tastes like dignity," she cried. I did too. Cinnamon can steady a person, so can being seen. I did not become rich, I became clear. There is a wealth that lives in clarity. As for Christmas, well, that year I drove to Tacoma with a warm pie and an untroubled heart. Agnes opened the door with her old laugh that has never needed anyone's approval. We ate pie on mismatched plates and nobody posted a thing. The air was thick with gravy and mercy. Children knocked puzzles to the floor. We put them back together, piece by piece, which is all any family can do when it is honest. In time, silence swallowed the Hendersons. That is not my triumph, it is theirs. People who build on mockery eventually live inside it. I do not check Erica's posts anymore. The screen steals time you could give to a crust that needs 5 more minutes, to a neighbor who needs 5 more sentences, to a prayer that needs 5 more words. I keep my prayers short now. They work better when I mean them. If you are my age or older, you already know, love without respect is not love. It is a contract you did not sign. If you are younger, hear me early. Kindness without boundaries becomes fuel for someone else's parade. Draw your line before you are forced to draw your sword. And if you are excluded from a table you helped build, remember this, tables can be set elsewhere. You can take your recipes and your records and your name and open a door with your own key. You can feed people who say thank you with their eyes, who pay with money and not entitlement, who tell you the crust is perfect because it is slightly imperfect, the way anything made by a living hand must be. The twist in my story was not a sensational revelation. It was practical, prosecutable deceit, a trail of signatures designed to make me small enough to manage. Exposing it did not make me a hero. It made me an adult again. I want that for you too, not vengeance, just the steady return of your full height. Mitchell and I are not fixed. We are mending. It is slower than breaking, but it lasts longer. He brings his children to the bakery sometimes, and they help me sugar the tops when the trays cool. They ask for stories about their grandfather, and I tell them the ones that make a man more than a eulogy. How he saved bacon grease in a jar and used it twice. How he could not stand the sound of a loose fan belt. How he looked at me in 1979 and decided he would be careful with me for the rest of his life. He was. That care lives here, in heat and flour and a name on a window. If this story found you at a kitchen table where you are tired of paying to be disliked, I hope it gives you a way to stand up without screaming. Gather your papers. Guard your recipes. Wrap your truth in red and gold if you must, but deliver it. And when the room quiets, keep your voice low. People listen better when they have to lean in. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for adding your wisdom below. I'll see you in the next video.